Good evening, or morning, or afternoon. My name is Britta Gundersen-Bryden, and I'd like to welcome you to this virtual presentation of the Victoria Historical Society. Please join me as we follow paw prints and track a dog's story through local archives and museums. Many Victoria Historical Society members received their copy of BC History magazine this summer and read the story of Wallace, the St. Bernard who was the mascot of the Canadian Scottish Regiment during World War II. I hope you enjoyed the story. My search to uncover Wallace's tale began at the Bay Street Armory in March 2017 when I attended my first Western Front seminar. Of course, I noticed the portrait of Wallace in the officer's mess. That's Wallace too, next to the portrait of the original Wallace. During breaks, I found myself in the Canadian Scottish Regiment's museum. My husband's father and two uncles had been in the Can Scots during World War II. The one for whom he was named, standing on the right, was killed in action 2 days after the Canadians landed in Normandy. The museum has a large collection of World War II photos, many on display, others in scrapbooks. The glass cases are full of artifacts. There is much Wallace memorabilia in the museum, including photos, his harness, and newspaper clippings. Those of you who received the BC History magazine may recognize the photo of Wallace and his handler, Wee Andy McGeorge. Among other things, I write nonfiction articles. I thought it might be time for a 21st century update on Wallace. After my visit to the Can Scots Museum, I turned to online resources. And there are many online resources. There are many references to Wallace in various newspapers between 1940 and 1950. I could do some of my research from my desk at home. I began to get a sense of the impact Wallace had not only on his regiment, but also in Victoria, in Vancouver Island communities, across Canada, and overseas. But as most VHS members will know, you can only go so far with online research. Then I went to the best source, Ready for the Fray by Reginald Roy. This is the official regimental history, first published in 1958. Roy relied on war diaries, documents, correspondence, and first-hand interviews with Can Scots veterans. Wallace received as much attention as most regimental leaders, and more than any other private. And there was one intriguing footnote referring to Wallace. CSR Archives, RHQ 1-1-20, letter, Cleland to Kingham, December 4, 1945, and loose folder file, Wallace. The name Cleland rang a faint bell. I wanted to see that file and get a copy of that letter. Finding archives isn't always straightforward. The Can Scots archives had been sent to the provincial archives over a period of several years. They eventually ended up at UVic, but not. There were file folders and boxes, lots of boxes, and a wide range of archive materials inside. There were several mounted photos, including this iconic one of Wallace. There were more than a dozen scrapbooks assembled by volunteer regimental historians. Scrapbooks like these, like ones bought at a 5 and dime. There were loose pages with unlabeled clippings. In this one, Wallace poses in the middle of the front row with other members of his regiment. Wallace and the Can Scots Pipe Band were a big hit at British fundraising events, parades, garden parties, and children's outings. Local papers often had photos of Wallace and his pipers, such as the one in the lower left-hand corner. Wallace often got a mention, even if the local media didn't always get it quite right. In this article, he is referred to Bruce, the Newfoundland. The names Wallace and Bruce do go together in the minds of many, and St. Bernards and Newfoundlands do share some common genes, so... Wallace had an accident in 1950, shortly before he died. He is shown here with his wartime handler and post-war companion, wee Andy McGeorge. The entry reads, November 1st, 1950. Today, the regiment lost one of its most popular and lovable members. K5700 Private Wallace passed away in his sleep after leading a very interesting and active life. He was 13 years old when he answered. Then, Lieutenant Colonel C.M. Whiteman kept a very small, personal paper diary as the Can Scots went into holding position on the English coast, waiting to embark for the Normandy invasion. Whiteman wrote about Wallace and wrote about everybody else too. Everybody waiting, waiting, he wrote, and Wallace was waiting for his pipers and his soldiers to come home. I hit pay dirt at you, Vic. Bells went off. At the end of the war, Wallace had been given to the Can Scots in honor of my husband's uncle, Captain J.T. Bryden. Family history and an important part of Can Scots history were linked together. I knew I had to track down more about Wallace. My next stop was the Victoria Public Library's Heritage Room. The majority of the stories in the Can Scots clipping file are about Wallace. Of special significance is this double-page spread published in the Daily Colonist when Wallace died. Note all of the photos of Wallace's various adventures. Wallace's story was told and retold with the arrival of each new successor, Wallace II, III, IV, and V, or when the Can Scots marked a significant anniversary. I found other bits and pieces at the library, such as the story of Wallace in a little book by Avis Walton, but nothing was more reliable than Roy's account in Ready for the Fray. It was time to go beyond Victoria. No one disputed that Captain Jack Mackay bestowed the St. Bernard on the Can Scots in 1940. I asked myself, how could A.D. Cleland come to have passed Wallace along to Mackay? How were these two men linked? I found the answer in Ladysmith, the Vancouver Island town nearest to Cleland's resort, Saltaire. Mackay and Cleland had both been officers in the Ordnance Mechanical Engineers based in Esquimalt at the beginning of the war. The next stop was by chance at the Chemainus Museum. One of several interesting display cases recognized local military contributions. The Can Scots shoulder patch drew my eye to a scrapbook, and there was a clipping of Wallace. Museum volunteers were unable to identify the donor of the scrapbook or the pictured soldier, but the Can Scots were an island regiment, not just a Victoria regiment. I felt there was more to be found about Wallace further up island. My hunch turned out to be correct. The 2019 BC History Federation Conference took me to Courtenay, where there were several reminders that the Comox Valley had been the base of the Can Scots Sea Company. And the most powerful of those reminders was a large, leather-bound scrapbook compiled by volunteer Ruth Masters in the 1970s. Masters assembled clippings, official notices, family photos, and notes from personal interviews with veterans to create a page for each of the Valley's fallen in World War I and World War II. This is the page for Captain J.T. Bryden. Masters received a quote and a story from Jack Bryden's colleague, Tom Butters. I was finally ready to update Wallace's story. using a blend of local history and family history, in large part thanks to several smaller island museums and archives. I could finally stop chasing Wallace's tail. Here on Vancouver Island, we are fortunate to have so many wonderful resources and people who are interested in preserving local history. As a footnote, during the BC History Federation field trip to Cumberland, while I was on the trail of a dog story, who should march by but a handsome St. Bernard? He leaves very large paw prints indeed. Thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this story about Wallace. Please bring your questions and comments to the virtual VHS meeting on September 24th, 2020.